the day a clipboard-wielding HOA Karen knocked on my door. I had no idea my quiet life was about to detonate into a legal nightmare that would shake an entire neighborhood. She didn't introduce herself. On the third morning, while my mom was resting in her recliner, she just pointed at my brand new wooden fence and said 6 words that still echo in my head. "You will demolish this immediately." I laughed at first, thinking it was a joke. The fence was on my property, professionally surveyed, fully permitted, and built after months of planning. But Karen didn't laugh. She flipped through her papers like a prosecutor preparing a death sentence and told me the HOA had absolute authority. According to her, my fence violated community guidelines, disrupted visual harmony, and somehow encroached on shared land. She ended with a threat: comply in 7 days or face fines, liens, and legal action. That night, I stood in my backyard staring at the fence, feeling something between anger and unease. I'd lived here for years without issues. No disputes, no warnings, just peace. Now suddenly I was a villain in my own home. I reviewed my property deed again, just to be sure. Everything checked out. Still, something about Karen's confidence bothered me. She wasn't guessing. She was certain. The next morning, I received an official HOA letter. Same demand, same deadline, same threats. Neighbors started acting strange too. Some avoided eye contact. Others whispered. One older man quietly told me, "You should just tear it down. HOA doesn't lose." That sentence hit harder than the threat itself. Instead of backing down, I did something Karen didn't expect. I hired a land surveyor. Not a quick one. An exhaustive historical boundary analysis going back decades. Old plats, archived maps, original subdivision records. If they wanted a fight, I wanted facts. When the surveyor returned weeks later, his face was pale. He laid out the maps across my table, tapped the lines, and said, "Your fence is fine, but that's not the real problem." He paused, took a breath, and delivered a sentence that changed everything. According to these records, a large portion of this neighborhood was built on land legally belonging to you. At that moment, I realized this was no longer about a fence. It was about the truth they'd buried for years, and the war they accidentally started. What started as a fence dispute suddenly felt like uncovering a crime scene no one wanted reopened. The surveyor didn't just hand me papers. He handed me decades of buried history. Spread across my dining table were faded maps, handwritten measurements, and subdivision plans stamped with dates older than most of the homes around me. Lines overlapped, boundaries drifted, and right through the center of it all was my name. According to the original land records, my property wasn't just my backyard. It extended far beyond the fence line, cutting straight through streets, lawns, and houses that now belonged to the HOA members who were threatening me. At some point, long before I ever moved in, the developer had misrepresented boundaries. Land that should never have been sold was sold anyway. I asked the surveyor the question burning in my chest. "Are you sure?" He nodded. "I've double-checked everything. If this goes to court, it won't be small." Before I could even process that, Karen escalated. HOA violation stickers appeared on my fence. Daily fines began stacking up. Letters turned aggressive. One warned of forced demolition and legal seizure. They assumed fear would break me. Instead, it sharpened my resolve. I tried reason first. I emailed the HOA board with copies of the survey, politely asking for a meeting. Their response was immediate and chilling. They dismissed the documents as irrelevant, accused me of fabricating evidence, and ordered the fence removed within 48 hours. Karen even showed up again, this time with 2 board members, standing on what they claimed was community land. I didn't argue. I didn't shout. I simply told them the next conversation would be in court. That's when the tone changed. Lawyers entered the picture, not just mine, several. HOA. Attorneys scrambled to contain what they now realized was far bigger than a fence. Motions were filed, deadlines rushed, and quietly, neighbors began asking questions. One family knocked on my door late one night, whispering that they'd heard rumors about boundary issues years ago, but the HOA had promised everything was resolved. Then came the discovery phase. Old developer contracts surfaced, emails long buried were subpoenaed, and a pattern emerged. Warnings ignored, discrepancies concealed, and profits prioritized over legality. The HOA wasn't just wrong, they'd known something was wrong. When the court date was finally set, the judge ordered a full independent survey of the entire neighborhood. The results were undeniable. Parcel by parcel, the truth unfolded. Roads, sidewalks, even parts of homes stood on land never legally transferred. By the time the courtroom filled, the question wasn't whether my fence was legal. It was how deep the deception went, and who would pay the price. The courtroom was packed the day the evidence was presented. Neighbors sat stiffly in wooden benches. HOA board members whispered behind their attorneys, and Karen avoided my eyes entirely. The confidence she once wore like armor had vanished. What remained was fear. Quiet, trembling, unmistakable fear. The judge began with the independent survey results. Large screens displayed color-coded maps of the neighborhood. As each parcel appeared, a low murmur rippled through the room. My land wasn't a sliver. It wasn't a technical inch. It was massive. Entire yards, sections of road, and multiple structures were highlighted in red. Land never legally transferred. Land still tied to my deed. The HOA's attorney tried to argue. Historical use and community assumption. The judge shut that down immediately. Use did not equal ownership. Assumption did not override law. Each objection sounded weaker than the last, like excuses unraveling in real time. Then my attorney stood, calm, precise, ruthless. He walked the court through the timeline. The original developer, the incorrect filings, the ignored warnings, and the moment the HOA chose intimidation instead of verification. He paused, pointed directly to my fence on the screen, and said, "This fence is not the violation. It is the proof." That's when Karen lost control. She stood up without permission, insisting the HOA had authority, that rules were rules, that chaos would follow if the court ruled against them. The judge's gavel cut through her voice like thunder. She was warned once. She sat down shaking. Next came the bombshell. Internal HOA emails surfaced. Messages, acknowledging boundary inconsistencies years ago. One line froze the room. "If we admit this, the entire neighborhood is at risk." Silence followed. No denial, no explanation. Just truth hanging heavy in the air. The judge leaned back, removed his glasses, and delivered the ruling slowly, deliberately. The HOA had no authority over my fence. The fines were void. The harassment was unlawful. And most devastating of all, the court recognized my ownership. Claims over the disputed land. Pending resolution. Gasps echoed. Neighbors stared at each other in disbelief. The HOA board went pale. Karen's face drained of color as the power she once wielded evaporated in seconds. I didn't celebrate. I didn't smile. I simply breathed. Years of intimidation collapsed into one moment of clarity. The law doesn't care who shouts loudest. It only cares who is right. But the story wasn't over yet. The ruling was just the beginning. What followed would tear the neighborhood apart and force everyone to choose sides. The ruling didn't just end a dispute. It detonated a reckoning. Within days, the HOA froze all enforcement actions. Meetings were canceled. Emails went unanswered. The once powerful board that ruled through fines and fear suddenly went silent, like a machine that had lost its power source. Karen resigned within a week, citing personal reasons, though everyone knew the truth. Authority without legitimacy collapses fast. Neighbors were divided. Some were furious, terrified their homes might be affected, angry that the HOA had gambled with their security. Others came quietly, apologetically, admitting they'd always suspected something was wrong. A few thanked me for standing up when no one else would. I reminded them I never asked for this fight. I just refused to be bullied out of my own land. The court ordered mediation to resolve the land claims. Some homeowners negotiated easements. Others paid compensation. Roads were replatted. Titles corrected. It took months of paperwork and years of consequences. The developer's old company was dragged into litigation, and insurance companies scrambled to limit damage. What had been buried under decades of good enough planning was finally exposed to daylight. As for me, the fence stayed exactly where it was. Not because I wanted to gloat, but because it symbolized something bigger. It was proof that standing your ground matters. That rules without truth are just threats. And that intimidation only works when people stay silent. The HOA eventually restructured under court supervision. New leadership. New transparency rules. No more unchecked power. No more weaponized bylaws. The neighborhood slowly healed, though trust took far longer to rebuild. Sometimes, late in the evening, I walk along that fence and think about how close I came to tearing it down out of fear. How easy it would have been to comply, to avoid conflict, to let someone else decide what I was allowed to own. That choice would have erased the truth forever. This story isn't about revenge. It's about documentation, patience, and the courage to question authority, especially when it's loud and confident. If you ever face intimidation, remember this. Get the facts, stay calm, and don't underestimate your rights. Power fades. Truth doesn't. What started as a demand to destroy a fence ended with an entire system exposed. And the lesson remains carved deeper than any boundary line. Sometimes, the smallest stand reveals the biggest lies. If this crazy HOA Karen story shocked you, don't forget to hit subscribe for more jaw-dropping neighborhood drama. Smash that like button to show your support, and comment below. Would you have stood your ground or let them take your land? Let me know!